The 1930s. This is a terrible time in the history of this country. It was Depression time. Hoover had been elected president, promised a chicken in every pot and a car in every garage. Nobody had a pot, nobody had a garage. So there was no place to put them, so you couldn't get them. Life was simple. A lot of people were poor, but we didn't know we were poor because everybody else was just like us. We were just all people. It was a great time to grow up, though. I'll tell you, living in this country at that time was a pleasure that, even though we were dirt poor, was wonderful. The things we did as children, the way we played, we made our own entertainment. Didn't take much to make us happy, and we got along great. You see, now the first thing we're going to look at is the building downtown here, the bank, and the old clock sitting there. We always referred to this clock and the one on top of the courthouse as the poor man's clock, because he didn't have no money to buy a watch, and that was the only way he could tell what time it was, just to look at them two clocks. We're looking again down the New York Avenue to the west, and the Conrad Building and the courthouse. Everybody came to town on Saturday night. That was just compulsory that you come to town on Saturday night. And you visited, and everybody had their parking place. And low beyond anybody got in it, they just flat out asked them to move, because that was where everybody come to see you. They wanted to transact business with you. And the store stayed open till 10 o'clock, and some of the grocery stores stayed open till 11 and 12. As long as there's anybody there to buy groceries, they stayed open for them. So it was a great time in my life as growing up here, even though I know it was rough on my parents to make enough for us to live on, but that was the way it was. This is a pavilion down at the trailer park that we saw earlier in some of the other films on the corner of Waltz and Florida Avenue. And this was where the folks that was staying in the trailer park would come over and have picnics and socials together, potluck dinners, I guess you'd say today, out here under this building. Later, this would become in this area right just to the north of this, DeLand would put in a small zoo there back in the 30s. And it didn't last long. A few alligators in a pond there, and maybe a monkey or two. I can't remember what was in it. It wasn't much, but anyhow, it was the DeLand Zoo. And this is the courthouse all decorated up on for probably the 4th of July, maybe, or a holiday of some type. And this is a beautiful building. I think today it is prettier. The part that's been redone is prettier than it was when it was originally built even. And this is looking at it from the north side. And it's, again, let me say that I think it's much prettier today than it was. The brown stuff they put on that building absolutely just about destroyed that building. It was so ugly. And of course the dome is a natural copper color here, and it's patinaed today, and it will eventually wear off, and it'll just have this natural copper color. But if you've ever noticed the Statue of Liberty in the New York Harbor, it's very patinaed, just almost like it is today on our courthouse. This is another picture in the same place, not near as good a picture. And this is looking at it from the other side. And this is, again, a very pretty building. Built in 1927, completed in 1927 as our courthouse, after having torn down the original one that's set in this same location. The county seat was moved here in 1887 from Enterprise. And this is looking at it again from the south side. Now get on the north side. This is a kind of a color picture of it, which shows a lot more brown in the bricks than they do in the black and white pictures. Again, we'll go out to the Roto-Gravere place on New York, on the truck route, the railroad tracks, and the casket factory and Babcock's and the machine place where they melt the motors for the motor holders, and then the cabinet factory, and then it burned down. This is the interior of the newspaper office, and in later years, this is the office of the newspaper down on Rich Avenue. This is where when the elections and president's election come off and everything like that back then, people go down and stand on the street and they would get the information in here to put up there to get it from the Western Union office, and they would post it up there to tell you who was winning the election. And of course in the local elections they were more interested in than the president election, because Volusia County has one of the most notorious political machines in the United States. Out of Cook County, Illinois, Volusia County was number 2 in politics and corruption, supposedly. If you've ever read Flamingo Road or saw the movie of Flamingo Road, or God Has a Long Face, written by the same man, those stories are based on politics in Volusia County. Both of them are. There's quite the thing here. This is Gene Jones on the left. This is he and his father, and they had a shoe shop. It had several shoe shops. This particular one was on Indiana Avenue, just to the east of the boulevard. And this is an airplane. It was a homemade airplane. On the right is the gentleman that built it, and he tried to fly that thing off of the beach. They hauled it over to Daytona with the wings off, I guess, and put them back on over there, and he was going to use the beach as a runway. And it wasn't too successful. He had a motor in there that was made out of a lawnmower. Really, it was a very small little old motor, and it never would. If you can see it, it's right up on the front of it's really up behind the steering, behind the propeller, and it wasn't strong enough to pick it up off the ground. It ran down the beach and ran down the beach, but it never would take off. It just was not enough power for it. So that was the end of his airplane making. And this is his truck that he announced with. He would do these for politicians, and then he was set up here at this one, right by the band shell. And that's the school administration building in the back. And the bandstand right there left, the band shell, and he would carry those over, and he would set up his sound system there for all the politicians to go up and make their speeches. And this was this time of year, back then you'd start seeing politicians coming in, and those who were running for state offices would come in with a motorcade and the police sirens and all that stuff would come into town, and they would go over there and set up, usually in the daytime, not at night, and make their speech to whoever wanted to come down and listen to them. And a lot of times the county politicians would have fish fries down there, and they would feed everybody that come a fish. And this was Mr. Tillis, by the way, was the man that had the airplane and also had all this sound equipment. Mr. Tillis had a radio shop here in DeLand, and that's the reason he got into this business, going around and doing all this areas with a public address system mounted on top of his car, and he'd ride up and down the streets of DeLand giving out all this information. They finally banned that in later years, where they couldn't do that because it was very disturbing to a lot of people who didn't want to hear about it nohow, because they'd already made up their mind who they was going to vote for. And there he is again. He's campaigning for Francis Whitehair when he ran for governor, and he was not elected. He was defeated. In fact, he didn't even carry Volusia County. And we're looking down the boulevard in this picture here, and you can see the cars and stuff. This is on South Boulevard, looking north from about Howard Avenue. And this building's across the street from the used to be the Social Security office. It's not now. It's being remodeled right now. But this is across on the west side of Amelia Avenue at the corner of Church Street. And you can see the ice factory here, their ice place where they vended out ice. And also it was later Haskell's Fish Market was in here. And then Lane Insurance was here at one time. It was used for a lot of things before it was remodeled. And this again, we're looking at the building on the corner of Howard and the Boulevard, which was the bus station. And you can see the place over there, and over on the right, you could penny scales over there by it, so you could weigh yourself for a penny. And the other building that go down beyond it. But when the furniture people bought this, they closed all that bottom end. And we're looking down New York Avenue, and you can see the brick street here again. All the main streets in town were all bricked, except later a few of them were like Howard Avenue was cement, but most of the earliest streets are brick. And this is looking in front of the Ford garage on the boulevard, looking to the north, and you see that the Standard Oil stand down to past the Amoco gas sign, and there was a service station that stood in there for many years. And Buddy Nordman at one time had his little hardware store in there where he made plugs and sold all kind of fishing tackle and hunting ammunition and things. And it was later torn down, and the parking lot put in there for the Drika building. And there's that Standard Oil Company sign. And right behind it over there, that big building there is a Florida Public Services building. This would be as Florida Public Service was broken up by the Monopoly Act and became two different companies. One of them was Florida Gas and one of them was Florida Public Service, but it actually was sold to Florida Power Corporation in '44. And they moved the building down on East New York Avenue to an old house. And this later became a restaurant here in this building. And it was eventually torn down. We're looking from just past Rich Avenue from the north, looking down south. Some of these pictures are in the 30s, some of them's going to be in the 40s, because remember the 30s were the Depression days, and wasn't a whole lot of pictures taken because people didn't have money to buy cameras or film with, so there wasn't a lot of pictures made then. And the pictures were mostly, the most pictures we have are in the 50s, because everybody had money then to buy them with, to buy film with and buy cameras, and that's when most of the pictures that we'll see later came from. And this again, the Drika, Mr. Fountain store. This is the City Hall. Now the building on the three bays on the left of the fire department. The fire department was located in here up until they built the building in the 60s, or maybe early 70s, over where it is, the fire station on the corner. And they moved out and this became part of the city offices complex, all closed in. But this was the fire station. Many years the firemen slept upstairs where the two big double windows are on the left. That's where their sleeping quarters and all were up there. This is just an aerial view of DeLand at this period of time. You can see the Putnam Hotel in the back, and on the left up the top, not in the middle of the picture, and on over a little further to the right, you see the courthouse there. And looks like a big city if you look at it, but a lot of trees in it. And if you get up to the right height and look out, you can't see nothing but trees. There's the Putnam. You're zooming in on it. That was a beautiful hotel in its day. It built in 1923, and it's still standing today, but it's not a hotel anymore. It's apartments in it. When we come back, we're looking back down the boulevard, our New York Avenue again, to the west. And this is a Goodyear tire. It's on the street there, in that vacant lot where the city parking lot is on the corner of Georgia Avenue. And this is just an ad for them. That's the Ford garage over in the back there. If you had to buy a set of them tires today, you'd have to own a big company that used heavy equipment, because otherwise you couldn't afford it, or most people couldn't. This is again a picture of the building side of the Athens Theater and the fish market and the Holder's garage, and on New York Avenue. On Florida Avenue. This is a 1934 Pontiac, I believe it is, in this picture. The picture was taken, it's brand new, it was taken down on the corner of Florida Avenue and Hubbard Street. You're back up on the boulevard again, and they're looking across at the bank on the corner and the dime store and Mr. Allen's furniture store. This was a service station. It was on Indiana Avenue, right across from the post office. What was the post office then? It's across from the county administration building today. There's a parking lot here. And that's a fellow by the name of Gus Smith, who worked for the fire department for many years here and also did house painting. And you can see they're incorporating with the Drika Theater, giving out a grand prize every month. And it's 1,500 something free. Can't tell what that is that they give away free. But right next to this, again, is Knight's Poultry Market to the right of this. And down kind of in the back of that was where they had the horseshoe pits, where they played horseshoes at there. This is an aerial view of Blue Lake, North Talmadge, South Talmadge. There's Lake Darty, Lake Hires. You see a lot of lakes in this picture, and it's amazing we had this many lakes. But you must remember one thing, this at one time was one huge lake. They cut those canals, man did, to that first, in fact, go back just a second, the first mechanized boat that had an engine in it in this area was on this lake here. Man had it, he kept it on the lake. Again, it's a big lake because they cut a canal from Blue Lake over to the North Talmadge, and they cut another one over to the south, to the north, and eventually carried all this water out of here into Hall Creek and drained all this so they could raise vegetables here. We'll see some more of that in a minute. There's one of the canals right there. We saw a picture over in the 1920s film of the lady standing there fishing on that canal. And this is a New York Avenue. It's a beautiful tree-lined street. And eventually it'll be all these streets, and DeLand will look very much like this one again, as the city continues to plant more and more trees. And this time, instead of planting a laurel oak, they're trying to put mostly up as live oaks, although they're also planting some Sherman oaks. But the laurel oak has a lifespan of about 85 years. The live oak is about 200 years. So the laurel oak is, the original ones in DeLand are gone. That's been well over 100 years ago, long over 100 years ago. So they're all gone. Their babies and grandbabies are what we're looking at today. This is an old buggy going down the street, DeLand, in front of the old Opera House on the corner of Rich Avenue and the Boulevard. You see the old drugstore there on the corner at that time. It was the Orange Belt Pharmacy. And again, we're looking down on the west side of the boulevard, the 100 block. You see the old bank building down there and Allen Drugstore. Here's one of the signs coming into DeLand, advertising DeLand and United States Tires are good tires. I never heard of them, but evidently it must have been money to put this kind of signs up. And it gives a little thing about DeLand's history there on the left. Now this is looking from Howry Avenue down into town on the boulevard. And then notice the Masonic building has not been built, and neither has the Drika building, the Clark building. The intersection of Indiana and the boulevard. This is a new building that we saw in the 1920s picture. I had some folks that are traveling in style. These were not tin can campers here. They had a chauffeur to pull them and a nice deluxe trailer in the back. And I don't think they make one like that anymore, because it's two-wheel, almost like a semi-trailer. And evidently it's got a hitch on the back of that, or built onto the back of that coupe. That's a nice looking outfit. And this is the first Memorial Day parade they had at our armistice parade they had in DeLand that we know of. This had been in the 1935, I think. This is looking up Orange Avenue from University. Now this is on the corner, I think it's of Orange Avenue in New York, and they're paving that intersection there, and you notice the cement mixer in the back. They're mixing their own cement and carrying it down in wheelbarrows and dumping it out in there. Then fellas spread it. This was a slow, arduous job to work like this with cement, because it's set up too fast on them. This happens to be Wisconsin Avenue from about Stetson Street north up towards Boundary. You notice it's two lanes too. There's trees down the middle of it at that time. This is one of the local dairies. See the nice cattle they had then. The dairies are a thing of the past in this country. There's only one dairy left in all of Volusia County, and that one happens to be Fisher's Dairy up on and DeLand Springs and on Lake Winona Road, and he wholesales his milk. So where do you get your milk from today? Anywhere but Volusia County. It comes from everywhere. And it's processed by these dairy bottlers and sold all over the state of Florida. And when I was thinking back, I can name just about close to 50 dairies at one time that was in just West Volusia County. I don't know how many were on the East Coast, but there was almost 50 of them. They come and went. Some lasted a little while, some of them closed up quick, some of them stayed for many, many years. And then after the war, the people started buying land and building houses around these dairies, and they complained so much about the smell and the odor and the state come in to give them waters to clean up and all, and they just couldn't do it. The expense was too great. Feed had got too expensive, and most of them just closed up. In fact, all of them did. They just closed up business, and Fisher's is the last one to hold out. I don't know how long he's going to continue to be able to hold out there with feed like it is, and I don't know what his milk prices are, but it's a hard job. It's a long, arduous job. They don't never stop, 24 hours a day. And but the first dairy here was the Antiquat Dairy, which was out around where the truck route and New York Avenue, and they sold mostly to the hotels here in town and some of the businesses, because just about everybody either had a milk cow or they had a neighbor that had one that they could get milk from. So you drank raw milk back then. There wasn't such a thing as pasteurized or milk. And you'd get the bottled milk, and the cream would be 4 or 5 inches deep on the top, and if you could get to the milk before anybody else, you'd take a spoon and try to dip as much of it out as you could just to get that good cream taste. If your mama caught you, was in big trouble, because she didn't want that cream dipped off of there. And this is a team of Clydesdale horses, and they're not from Budweiser, as we'll see here in just a minute. They're in town here in DeLand, coming in to show you about their beer business. And there's the company, it's Genesee, and that's the Clydesdales, and all behind them there, people out there looking at the horses, and there's a truck loaded with beer, and I don't know what's loaded with beer, probably feeding off of those horses in there. But whether this was before Budweiser ever had horses or not like this, I don't know. But this was in the 1930s. There's just a picture of the corner of the Boulevard, Indiana, the old bank building over there. Probably closed up, waiting to be opened again. That's Mr. Hendred. Mr. Hendred had a radio shop, worked in a radio shop right across the street from this station, which was located on the corner of Rich and Florida Avenue. And that little old open car thing there was used as a racer at one time out at when they had open wheel racing out at the fairgrounds. And there's Spec Campbell's Ford garage up on the South Boulevard. Notice the gas pumps out front. Now, the earliest days, they didn't have gas pumps. When my dad worked for Nams up there on the boulevard, they got their gas in 5-gallon cans, looked like milk cans, and that would sit in the back room back there, and just like sitting back there with a 10 case of dynamite in each one of them. It had been so volatile. And when somebody come along and wanted gas, they'd go out there with a big funnel, and they'd put a chamois skin over it, and then they'd pour the gasoline through that chamois skin and drain all the trash out of it before it got it to the car, keep it from clogging up the carburetors and the gas pumps in those cars. But that's the way the first gas was delivered to the people. And this is the Conrad building that after it's finished, as I told you, NAM had a part of that in the back right behind where you see those glasses there. The glass part of it was NAM's garage back there where my dad worked. And they worked there till NAM moved up on the boulevard to West New York to this location, which is just east of Florida, where the Abstract Company building is there today. It was one time the Goodyear store was in here after NAM closed up. When NAM and NAM closed, he was the oldest Dodge dealer in the state of Florida at that time. There's another view of a tin can camper that had come down, brought his white shirt and his $10 bill, never changed either one of them while he was here. This is a picture of South Boulevard. Now the big white place up on the top right is the football field. It's not finished yet. WPA was building this at the time this picture was made. They were digging that thing out and making that field. And to the left of it up there is a Conrad baseball park that's been completely rebuilt. The white place down in the bottom left is where the State Road Department building will be built. Over on the right-hand side there is a part of the golf course for the College Arms Hotel. This is the Woman's Club on Michigan Avenue, built in 1925. And the log cabin. This is where Cook's Steakhouse was. Now I think Jake's Steakhouse is there. But this was originally called the Log Cabin Barbecue Place. And that's the building on the right was where they had their cooker to cook their barbecue. And this is at Christmas time. If you look close, you can see Santa Claus going down the chimney up there. And the man that made this built this building, I can't recall his name, but he built this building. He was a German fella, and he built it by himself. He put the logs, his actual logs, mortared on it, and some of that building is still encased inside of the present building. And they lived right across the street where the Chinese restaurant is today. That was their home. And it was up until they tore it down. And I, when reading meters, Florida Power, I went up there to read the meter one day, and a back porch was screened in. And they had I could hear somebody talking, but I couldn't see nobody. And I finally realized it was a great big old parrot, a green parrot. That sucker would talk up a storm and imitate you just like it would mimic you. Anything you'd say, he could mimic you perfect. And the people that lived diagonally across the street in the back there on Palmetto Avenue had a big old German Shepherd dog called Duke. Well, every evening they'd go out and call Duke. Say, here, Duke, whistle for him and come get your supper. Well, that parrot heard that. And that sucker would sit over there and he'd call Duke. Just like he'd whistle and call him. And here Duke would come running across there. When he got there, of course, there wasn't nobody there. And Duke would stay there a few minutes and he'd go on back home. And the parrot would call him. He'd like to run that poor dog slam to death before he finally caught on. There wasn't nobody calling him for supper. And the folks moved, and when they moved, they couldn't take the parrot with them when they went to Orlando. And they gave it to somebody there in the neighborhood. And they left him out on the porch, and it rained, and he got wet and died of pneumonia. This is part of Greens Dairy. It was located out on a truck route today on the Greens Dairy Road out there. And this was a beautiful herd of cattle they had there, and they peddled door-to-door milk here in DeLand for many years, and finally sold out to T.G. Lee in Orlando. And there's their barns and their their silo for their feed. And this is some of the yards there where they milk for the milking cows. This again is looking up at those lakes that we looked at on Hortana, and the road that's going around between those two lakes is still there today. It's not paved, it's an unpaved road. But that was all farms now. They called it, back when I was in the 40s, when I was in high school, this was called the Dutton Farms. And Mr. Dutton grew all kind of vegetables on that farm, and commercially, and this is some of his crops. And then this picture, corn, and I don't know what all else he grew. His main thing was planting cabbage and irish potatoes. And we used to go out there when I was the Future Farmers, and we'd help him cut cabbage and dig potatoes as a part of our raising money for the chapter, Future Farmer chapter. This is rich soil out there. It's, of course, it's that lake bottom is what it is, and it's very rich. Look, and this is out close to there. This is I guess I don't know what they are. Some kind of fruit trees or apple or pecan trees. You can see the lake down in behind it. And this is a typical Florida road. You had to have big old tires on your car to get around in this kind of sand. Now this is not a street down in the DeLand area. This is probably out on one of the highways, either New Smyrna Road or the Daytona Road before it was paved. But you can see way in the back there, that road goes on a long ways. Now what'd you do if you met somebody? Well, one of you had to get off the road. And I guess you'd back up or find a place if you saw them coming. Whoever found the first places that could be gotten off of very easy, they got off. They're looking at the dime store again. This is where I spent every Saturday night down there. I'd get a nickel. Sometimes if Granddaddy was with us, he'd give me a dime. And I'd agonize the whole evening in the dime store trying to figure what I was going to buy with my nickel or dime, whichever I had. Because I didn't want to spend it right quick, because if I did, then I wouldn't have nothing to do the rest of the evening except run up down the street. So I'd wait till almost closing time before I'd go in and make my great big purchase. And again, this is Jimmy Hughes' sporting goods store. Jimmy Hughes was a nice man. Everybody liked him. He was an ardent fisherman. I don't know whether he ever hunted or not, but he loved to fish. And like I say, he finally moved to St. Augustine and opened a store up there, and that's where he died at. This is South Boulevard. Right to the right of this picture is where the DOT building will be built. And that's another picture of the log cabin. And no Santa Claus there this time. I think that's Mr. Evans, I believe his name was. He had a farm out on the out towards Sam Sula out there somewhere, and he would come into town on Saturdays a lot and sell vegetables right off the cart on the street there. And he had an ox and a donkey pulling that vehicle there. It wasn't really a wagon. I guess it was a wagon, but it had automobile wheels and tires on it. This is the corner of Adel in New York, looking towards town. You can't even see town for the trees. It's so thick. But this was all gone when they finished widening the road. These trees were gone, and they had to start all over again. Again, this is French's place. This is Mrs. Norriga with one of the girls. And this is out at the dairy. This is the fellow that worked for French out at the dairy out there. This is an old paint store again. I think this is where Mr. Woods was at. It's not Woods anymore in this picture, but I think this is the same building that he had. And it's still a paint shop. And looking down New York Avenue from the west. Some of these color pictures, in fact all these color pictures are actually postcards. And we're looking at, there's one of the signs, welcome you into DeLand. And you can see the Indian standing out there. I don't know whether he was real or what. I don't know what he was. Probably a painting of some kind. But he might have been a real man standing out there some days. But that'd have been a tough job standing out there every day waving to people that come by. but that may have been what he done. Now this is a DOT building right after it was first completed. Been enlarged quite a few times since then. When they built it, they thought it'd last forever that size. Just like a lot of the buildings they built don't last near as long as you think they are. This is a 1939 night parade in downtown DeLand. And you can see old Santa Claus there and the DeLand High School band behind them. And this was really a sight to behold. I guess I can't remember it. I know I must have went to it, but I can't remember it. This is just a shady street, probably Minnesota Avenue. And this is the corner of Alabama and New York. Looking east, you can see the walkway going up to the College Arms Hotel there. This is Dentler Brothers, the Blue Goose Packing House out on the corner of Adel and Michigan Avenue. There was quite a few packing houses in the DeLand area, probably at least in the immediate part of town here, right around DeLand and up close to it. There was probably at least 8 or 10 major packing houses that shipped fruit out by rail all over the country. And as the concentrate business all of a sudden came on, packing houses went out. In fact, you couldn't afford oranges today to eat out of a store if they packed them today like they had to pack them then all by hand. It was all labor intensive, mostly done by ladies, and that worked the season there, in the winter season, and they didn't get paid very much. But today you couldn't afford oranges if they had to do them that way. Now these fellows here, you see them poking down that hole? They're going to pull a gopher out there. And there's the gopher. They got him out. They put a hook on the end of that pole and they'd run it down, or sometimes they didn't even have a pole. They just have a hook on a long piece of wire, usually a piece of wire off of bed springs. It went around the edge of a bed spring. It was real stiff. They could get a hook built right at the end of it, and they could go down and hook that gopher's hull and just drag him right out of there. Today when they're going to relocate him, they spend hundreds of dollars digging one up and moving. When you do it this way, it doesn't hurt him a bit. But they prefer to do it the other way. But back then, this was food. These were called Hoover chickens, because during the Depression, this was about the nearest thing you could get to chickens without having to buy them. And they were Hoover chickens. So if you ever hear of a Hoover chicken, you're hanging about a gopher. That sucker's protected today, so you better not even touch one of them and let them catch you, because if you kill one of them, you'd be better off killing somebody, because you'd get more flack from killing that gopher than you will from killing a human being. But they're fast disappearing in Florida as everything builds up. Their homes are gone. They have no place to go, and they supposedly relocate them, but you can't relocate all the gophers into one 10-acre tract. There's no place for them to live, and they'll die out. And this is one of the vanishing objects in Florida today, or animals, is the Florida tortoise gopher. This fella here has got his new Model T Ford, and he's quite proud of it. He's over on Florida Avenue near Hubbard, and he's quite proud of his new car. And I'd be proud of it too if I had it today. There's our post office. It stayed there until the county administration building was built. It was used as a health department. In its later years, when the post office moved down on the corner of Clara Avenue in New York. Built in the early 20s, late teens, early 20s. This is just a picture of downtown DeLand on an aerial view again. And in the upper left up corner up there is the Putnam Hotel. And you can see this is the boulevard you're looking at. And there's the Putnam down there. And we're looking down the boulevard and the courthouse. Now DeLand was a nice town. It is a nice town. It's something we can all be proud of, because it's one of number one Main Street. It is the number one Main Street, or was 2 years ago, in the whole United States. And last year, or before, it was number one in the state of Florida. Again, so it was the first Main Street in Florida, and it's a great place to live in. It's a great place to grow up in, and I still think it's as good as any place in the United States to grow up in. And after the war, he opened a used car lot right next to the courthouse over on New York Avenue. He probably leased the property. I don't think he ever owned it, but he probably leased it from the county and had his used car lot there. Right behind it on Indiana Avenue was a big old two-story house up until, I guess, maybe into the early 50s, late 40s. And in its last years, it was Spanish-American War veterans used as a meeting place. And this is a bowl-drome. This was a bowling alley next to the Athens Theater. It's the only picture I've ever found of it. And I don't know why, because it was so popular during the war, especially. If everybody tried to come there and bowl, you might recognize some of the people in there. There's Lloyd Clifton on the bottom, on the second from the left, second from the right on the bottom row. Barbara Hayes and several other people in there that some of you will recognize today. But that was bowling alley. It was a center of activity, especially for the Navy guys to come in and bowl there with the girlfriends until they finally built a bowling alley out on the airport. You won't find any airport pictures in this file, because that is an entirely different program that we'll probably do one night in the near future to show you about the airport and its very beginning up through the Navy years and after the war. This is one of the high school classes come down to Mr. Josh Connell's printing place here. He published the Volusia County Democrat as a weekly newspaper, and they come down to see how he published a newspaper. And this is South Boulevard down just side of Euclid Avenue looking towards town. And this little old building here is really probably out of date in this thing, in this particular group of pictures, but this little house here was later converted into the first help-yourselfy laundromat in town, and Mr. Pope put this in. And it's been torn down now. It's a city used as part of their work center there. And the curb diner out on North Boulevard, just before you get to Washington Street on the right. Georgia Boy, was later called, someone called it Georgia Boys. But this is where you pull up out front and toot your horn, and somebody'd come out of there and get your order and bring it back into you, and put it hanging on the window there so you can eat in your car and listen to the radio and do what you want to do. And this, you notice a hamburger, I believe it says 15 cents on that sign there. Atlantic Ice Company. Before we had electricity, everybody had electric refrigerators. Of course, you had to have ice, and the Atlantic Ice Company had their plant out there where Florida Power's building is today, and they furnished you ice. And that's the reason electricity come to the south, was not to put lights in your house, but to make ice with, because the south desperately needed ice. And this was one of the things. In fact, I was an iceman just when I first got out of high school, before I went in the Navy. I had an ice route here in DeLand. Wonderful time. I enjoyed it thoroughly. It was hard work, but I had fun doing it. And this is another picture of New York Avenue down around Bourse, looking towards town. And as you recognize this old building that's on Indiana Avenue, is where the law offices of Hull, Landis, Graham, and French, and it's vacant today. And this is the old news building. And the band shell. Oh, what a wonderful time the band shell presented for everybody back then. On Thursday nights, or Wednesday nights, I can't remember which it was, in the summertime, they would have talent night down there, and everybody think they could sing or play an instrument or make bird calls or whistles or whatever, they could go up on stage and do their thing. And it was, some of the little bands played around here. They'd come there and play mostly string music, Western style music. And Mr. Heaney, not Heaney, but Pop Bushnell used to perform there with his DeLand band for many years. He was a feature there on Sunday afternoons, and other times he would come there with his band and play in the band shell. And as I say, all the politicians came there to give their speeches. Torn down shortly after the war. They said it was eat up with termites. I guess it was. I don't remember. I just know they tore it down. It was hard to see it go. This is the aftermath of 1940's hurricane that come here. I think it was about 41 or 42. It blew down the docks out there at Lake Winnipesaukee, where the people used to go out there and swim and everything. And they had a big high things out there where you could ride sled down it into the lake and all. It all blew down in that hurricane. I think it was a 42, I believe. And pretty severe hurricane that come through here at that time. And this is Harry Avenue. Harry was a double-lane road at one time, all the way from from Amelia Avenue to Stone Street. And the part from this part from here, from Amelia here, all the way up to I guess it's Clara, was the center section was paved over. And this is a Win Lovett's, the Lovett store in DeLand. It was in around where Gus Gibbs's place is on the boulevard. And back then it was known as Lovett's. And they also owned Piggly Wiggly and Table Supply. It later became Win and Lovett, and then later it became Win Dixie, which it is today. And that's Miss Hines Rover with the checkered shirt. She was the manager there at that time. I worked in there also at one time. And on the left is a bus for the college out on Highway 11. They had a agriculture college out there, started up in the late 30s, and operated till the war started, and it closed up and never reopened. But it was they had boys and girls out there that were learning how to be farmers and how to do horticultural work and so forth. It was called Pineland College. Green's Taxi. There were several taxi cab companies here in town, especially during the war, because people had to go someplace. And a lot of them had to use taxi cabs. If they didn't have no gas rationing tickets, they couldn't go nowhere. So taxi cabs were put to much use, although the city did have a transit bus system here during the 40s. It closed up after the war because nobody didn't want to ride in that bus no more. But it served a great purpose during the war years. This is Geronimus' station out on the corner of Daytona Road, Old Daytona Road, and the boulevard. And this is just another view of it. Kimberly Carter had you can see another building over in the background here. Kimberly Carter had a garage over there where he did automobile repair work. And that's all Orange Grove across the street. That's part of the Nordman's place over there. And this is Frierson's temporary gas station down on the corner of Ohio and the boulevard by the railroad track, while his other place was being redone up there, where we'll see in a minute. But look at the price of gasoline when this was being done, 19 cents a gallon. Well, I can remember it was as low as 13 cents a gallon. And if we had gas wars, they'd try to keep people from getting to the low price station. They'd block the driveways and they'd carry it out in cans and pour it in people's cars. And this is Frierson's up on the corner of Church Street and the boulevard where he went back to when he left down there by Ohio, and he stayed in here until the building was sold to the Barnett National Bank when they built the bank building there on that piece of property. And this is looking down the boulevard just to the north of Pennsylvania. And this is looking up the boulevard from just this side of University. This is in the Veterans Park there by the Bandshell Park, and this was where the first city well was located. And the DeLand Garden Club used this building in later years for their clubhouse until they built their place up on the corner of Alabama and Beaufort Avenue, and this was torn down. And this is up on North Boulevard, north of Church Street on the west side of the boulevard. See all the small stores along there. And this is J.F. Nam's building, and looking down the boulevard there, and the little quick lunch, and I believe that's my father, Bill Dreger Sr., walking across the sidewalk there, because he worked there for 30-something years. And this is the station out on the north-south boulevard that I spoke of, out there by Mr. The man that made all the ornaments out there, and then all the cast concrete stuff. This was a station. My folks rented this station for couple of 3 years, and my mother ran it. My dad was still working in the garage. But at that time we had pumps instead of them electric pumps. We had the pumps you pumped up and with this glass cylinder on top showed you how many gallons of gas was in it and how much you get. And over on the left, she had a little eating place in there, and then we all lived in the rest of that building. And again, we were there in the Depression years, and my dad had planted a big black-eyed pea patch out back. It must have been a quarter of an acre of it, and them was the barrenest suckers I ever saw. And they bored right through till the frost came in the fall. And we eat black-eyed peas for breakfast, we eat them for dinner, and we eat them for supper. And for many, many years after I was grown, I could not eat a black-eyed pea. All I could think of was in Depression years when they eat them all the time. And this was there was another little station right up on the corner of what's truck now, Taylor Road there. There was another little station there on that corner too. And this is one of the shaded streets in a penny. This is off a postcard. This is probably New York Avenue, or the South Boulevard. And you notice the pretty flowers they painted in there along the street to make it look pretty. And this is Ed Caffin's Laundrette on West Rich Avenue. That was another one of those help yourself in laundries that Ed ran there for quite a few years. And the Athens Theater, and you can see the battle cries up on the marquee of it then. And this is the station over on the corner of Florida and Rich. And Monso Tatum ran this thing during the 40s, owned it. And Florida Public Service was right next towards the Drika building there. Picture a little hard to see because it came off a newspaper picture, but the little building you could make out in the center back there was Pop Klein's peanut stand. Now that's a modern building for him. For many years he had it sitting out on the sidewalk there, and it was nothing but one of those old popcorn machines that you see in old movies on the streets of New York and in places. And all glass. And but he finally, I don't know why he got rid of that, but he built this little place just off the sidewalk. But those two buildings, those two things, the other with the glass one and this one, sit there day and night, and nobody ever bothered them. I don't remember ever being vandalized or touched. But the theater back then didn't sell popcorn or nothing, and everybody would go down and get a bag of popcorn or some peanuts or something to carry the movies with them. He was an absolute institution here. Palm Inn. Oh, this is a wonderful place. Everybody liked to go to Palm Inn. He had the first liquor license issued in Volusia County after the Prohibition ended. And this was everybody went out there to get their drinks. And during the war, he would cash the paychecks for the fellows or people that worked at the boat works and at the glider factory. And of course, if they cashed their checks there, they left part of it. So they'd have to have a drink or two while they was in there. But this survived many years and it's still there right today as a, but not as a Palm Inn. And the architecture has changed on the inside especially. But it's always been a wonderful place to eat and to go have a nice evening. This is where my folks carried my wife and I to when we got married to have our dinner, our wedding dinner at, after we'd run off to Georgia and got married and come back home. Mr. Brooks was the man that owned it at that time, and they called him Brooksy. And everybody liked Brooksy. He was a fine man. And his wife and her sister both worked there with him. And this was Booker's ice cream parlor. And Booker also had delivered milk. He didn't have a dairy. He bought the milk and put it, bottled it, and delivered milk out around town. In fact, this is what George Berlanti was doing when he met his wife across, his future wife across the street at Kirkland's store. He was delivering milk for Booker's here. And once a week, usually, most of the time, but not every week, we'd, my folks would carry us, my brother and I down there, and get us a nickel ice cream cone. They didn't get one because they couldn't afford it, but we'd get, me and him would get an ice cream cone. Daddy and them would usually talk to Mr. Booker there, and we'd eat up our ice cream cone while he was talking. Then we'd have to go over to that fountain on the right-hand corner over there and get us a drink of water before we left. But this was another institution. This building is still standing today. First bowling alley I can remember in DeLand was an outdoor bowling alley on East Rich Avenue, just off the boulevard. And if you look down there by that hairstylist, hair place there on the right, if you look close, you'll see that lane right there, that bowling lane. It's Terrazza. And they mostly bowled duck pins there, the little short pins. And they would hit them things down there and them rats would fly everywhere. And they couldn't hardly get anybody to set pins for them because anybody going to sit down there in that place. And it had a shed over the front and a shed over the back, and all in the middle was open. And if it rained, if it was a rainy day, of course, nobody went down there to bowl. But that was before the Bowldrome opened over by the Athens Theater. And this is the officers of the Barnett National Bank here in DeLand in 1947. And you see Mr. Perkins was the president, John Cannon was there, Mr. Holler was there, Mr. Anderson, a lot of people, and some of you will recognize some of the folks in this picture. And this is on the boulevard from looking down on Indiana Avenue, looking north up the boulevard. And that sign on the left down there that looks like a hat, that's Condon's Restaurant. And his motto was, this is where the elite meet to eat. And didn't many folks eat in restaurants back then. Everybody eat at home. Mostly they were tourists, or once in a while somebody to celebrate a birthday or something, they might go down there, but most of it was tourist traffic or maybe some of the people that worked downtown. But restaurants were not very popular then because folks didn't have money to spend in them. But Mr. Condon was a nice man, and his restaurant was nice and clean, and it was I guess a nice place to eat. I never ate there, never had the money to eat there. In 1941, the DOT decided they better redo the boulevard in DeLand, which they did. They started at Plymouth Avenue and went to Beersford and repaved the brook thing with concrete. And this is right in front of Elizabeth Hall, where they're working now. And this is downtown DeLand. Now, if the folks thought they had it bad doing streetscape to merchants, can you imagine this? This went on for a long time, getting that relaying all the stuff under the street, all the sewers, the water lines, telephone lines, all that had to be relayed, and all the bricks taken up that were in there. It was a long, lengthy job, took a lot of work. It was not completed till in 1941. I think it started in 1940. It wasn't completed till 41. And there you can see Mr. Condon's Restaurant sign there again in this picture. And there's the work on the corner of Indiana and the Boulevard, Fountain Store in the back. All that sand piled up there. And this is their Boulevard in New York, and that's the truck that the cement mixer actually. There were no cement plants to haul your cement in these special trucks. They had to make the cement right there on site. And then another picture of that corner. I know my dad used to kid about cement. You know, the mixture, common mixture is one shovel full of cement, 3 shovelfuls of sand, and 2 shovelfuls of rock. But he said some of the fellows that poured cement around here had 1 shovel full of cement and 3 wheelbar full of sand. So the cement wasn't very good. This is on the south end of it. There's Clark's building over on the right there. This is almost in front of the Muse bookstore where this picture was taken, looking down the boulevard. This was a great improvement for the city of DeLand. It's got everything tore up out there in the street here, putting down cables and water lines. Sewers. And this again is on South Boulevard, looking up toward the Ford garage there. So back then, everything was downtown. I mean, there wasn't any shopping centers. Everything was downtown. The grocery store, department store, everything was downtown. So you had to come down and get your stuff. It didn't matter whether you had to walk a block, around the block, in the back door, or where you got into it at. But you had to go in there to get your stuff because there wasn't no place else to buy unless you went to Sanford or Daytona. And this is the big ceremony they held up on the steps of the courthouse celebrating the opening of the street. And you can see some of the people in this picture here are one you can recognize on the far right there, right against the edge of the picture, is Amory Underhill, and the big man on the left up there, that's Francis White here, and some more of them standing there, Miss McGregor, and but the big fellow right there on the left, and with the lady with the white-looking dress on, is Governor Fred Cone and his wife. And he was come here to cut the ribbon, which we'll see him do in this picture right here. He's fixing to cut the ribbon to officially open the street. And the picture to the right is Amory Underhill, Francis White here, Governor Cone, Judge Perkins, and Gerald Frierson in that picture. And this is a great picture and a great time for the city of DeLand to have this new concrete paved road that we still use today. We're in this particular video, and we'll come back again with another one in the very near future. And just remember that the 40s, we had the airport here, the Navy base, and the boat works and Babcock's, which I hope will be able to bring to you in another video very soon.